Bonjour et bienvenue à cette conférence de presse. Good morning and welcome to this press conference, or should I say good afternoon. Je vais maintenant passer la parole au ministre LeBlanc pour commencer. So I will now turn to Minister LeBlanc to begin.
Merci beaucoup, Jean-Sébastien. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. Good afternoon. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, the Minister of Transport, Omar Alghabra, and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health, Jennifer O'Connell. Depuis le début de la pandémie, mon équipe ministérielle et moi travaillons en étroite collaboration avec eux et leurs équipes. En tant que membre du Conseil des ministres, je constate aussi régulièrement l'expertise et le dévouement des fonctionnaires fédéraux comme ceux que j'ai le plaisir de côtoyer quotidiennement. En cette période difficile et incertaine, ils se sont dépassés pour fournir des services critiques aux Canadiennes et aux Canadiens à une vitesse sans précédent. And as vaccines became readily available, public servants stepped up yet again with their arms out among the many Canadians who have already been fully vaccinated. That is so important because we continue to face more transmissible and more dangerous variants of concern. Les autorités de santé publique continuent de nous dire que les vaccins sont de loin le meilleur moyen de mettre fin à cette pandémie. Nous le savons. C'est pourquoi nous vous annonçons aujourd'hui que nous exigerons la vaccination dans la fonction publique fédérale. We know that vaccines are the best way to end this pandemic. That is why we are announcing today that we will require vaccinations in the federal public service. Et nous lançons un appel à toutes les industries sous réglementation fédérale et évidemment aux sociétés d'État et aux agences fédérales de faire de même immédiatement. Étant le plus important employeur au pays, le gouvernement du Canada veut faire de sa part pour protéger les fonctionnaires et leurs communautés où ils vivent et travaillent au Canada, et ça aussi partout dans le monde. Il s'agit aussi d'encourager fortement les autres en exerçant un leadership évident fédéral dans les secteurs que nous réglementons aussi. Tous ces efforts visent à aider le Canada à atteindre la couverture vaccinale dont nous avons besoin pour ouvrir l'économie, pour la garder ouverte et pour protéger les millions de personnes non vaccinées qui sont vulnérables aux infections. Nous nous concentrons sur la santé publique des Canadiens et sur le soutien de la résilience économique de notre pays. La prochaine étape consiste à mobiliser nos principaux intervenants, notamment évidemment les syndicats, les agents négociateurs, avec lesquels nous avons travaillé en étroite collaboration tout au long de la pandémie. Nous collaborons avec eux et d'autres partenaires de la famille fédérale pour mettre au point les détails de cette robuste approche fédérale en matière de vaccination. Nous étudierons notamment comment cette exigence sera mise en œuvre au moyen d'une preuve de vaccination et par d'autres moyens de protection au besoin. We will take the time needed to get this right, but we will also act very quickly. The next step is obviously to engage our key stakeholders, including unions, bargaining agents, to build the details of this strong, mandatory federal vaccination plan. We are targeting implementation early this fall, and we will obviously communicate the details as this work unfolds, but this work begins immediately. The Government of Canada has a large workforce and a large reach to help in the fight against COVID-19. It is both our opportunity, but also our duty to lead by example. Nous avons le devoir d'assurer la sécurité de nos employés et de ceux qu'ils servent, ainsi que de leur communauté aussi. C'est ce que nous faisons avec l'annonce aujourd'hui. Je vous remercie, and now I'm happy to turn over the microphone to my friend and colleague, the Minister of Transport, Omar Alghabra. Omar.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Bonjour à tous. I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Canadians have demonstrated strength and resilience throughout the pandemic and have shown extraordinary commitment to following public health advice. Canada's vaccination rate is among the best in the world. But to protect ourselves and each other from the virus and its variants, we must do better. We need to reach as many Canadians as we possibly can. Today, we are announcing that the Government of Canada intends to require vaccinations across the federal public service. Following this example, we also expect that Crown corporations and other employers in the federally regulated sector will also require vaccination for their employees for the same compelling reasons. Furthermore, as soon as possible in the fall and no later than the end of October, the Government of Canada will require employees in the federally regulated air, rail, and marine transportation sectors to be vaccinated. In addition, the vaccination requirement will also extend to certain travelers. This includes all commercial air travelers, passengers on interprovincial trains, and passengers on large marine vessels with overnight accommodations, such as cruise ships. Of course, for those few who are unable to be vaccinated, accommodation or alternative measures, such as testing and screening, may be determined in each situation to protect broader public health by reducing the risk of COVID-19. I've heard from employers in the federal transportation sector who are concerned about protecting their employees. Workers are counting on their employers to develop robust vaccination policies for their workplaces. Vaccine requirements in the transportation sector will help protect the safety of employees, their families, passengers, their communities, and all Canadians. And more broadly, it will hasten Canada's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen how devastating COVID-19 has been to our transportation and tourism sectors. We must protect the hard-won gains made by Canadians. Canadians deserve to feel confident when traveling that the environment around them is safe. We need to regain public confidence in travel. Such confidence will give a boost to our industry. Being vaccinated makes the workplace and travel safer for everyone. We will work closely with key stakeholders, operators, and bargaining agent in particular to develop a practical approach to requiring vaccines in these sectors as quickly as possible. As I noted, the health and safety of Canadians will always be our first and most important priority. La santé et la sécurité des Canadiens sont notre priorité. And lastly, to my fellow Canadians, next time you get on a bus to go to work, hop on a ferry, take a train or fly to another Canadian city, or any number of other industries public service employees are part of, remember, they work hard to serve you every day. Let's protect ourselves and each other by getting vaccinated. I want to thank Canadians for their continued cooperation in the face of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Canadians want to get back to normal as quickly as possible. Those who get vaccinated will pose less risks to themselves and their fellow Canadians. Because of this, they will be able to benefit from additional easing of public health measures. To those who have not been vaccinated yet, know that vaccines are our best way out of this pandemic. Please go get your shot. We're not quite there yet, but by continuing to work together, we will end this fight. Thank you. Merci. And now I will ask my friend and colleague, Jennifer O'Connell, to take the mic.
Thank you, Omar and Dominic, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking Canadians for their commitment to fighting COVID-19. We know vaccines are key to beating COVID-19. And while we still need to practice public health measures, particularly in crowded and indoor spaces, vaccines have allowed us to reconnect with loved ones and return to many of the activities missed during the pandemic. They are also essential to ensuring the safety of our employees. And this is why the federal government is committed to protecting the health and safety of all Canadians. Vaccine requirements across the public service reflect that commitment. Required vaccination also sets an example for everyone, including other public and private sector employers. This will help keep our country safe and contribute to stopping the spread of COVID-19 and its variants. As we face the fourth wave of this pandemic in Canada, it is more important than ever to bring down COVID-19 infection rates, and we have enough doses to fully vaccinate every eligible person in Canada, and it is important that everyone does their part to increase the vaccination uptake. So if you haven't been vaccinated yet, I urge you to make a plan to do so. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back to Minister LeBlanc.
Jennifer, thank you very much. And Jean-Sébastien, over to you. We're obviously, all three of us, happy to take questions now. Jean-Sébastien, à vous.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le ministre. Donc, tel que mentionné, nous allons maintenant débuter la période de questions. Ministers and the parliamentary secretary will now be happy to take your questions. As usual, it will be one question and one follow-up per reporter. Donc, comme d'habitude, ça va être une question et un suivi par journaliste. And I will now hand it over to the operator for the first question. Donc, je vais maintenant passer la parole à l'opérateur pour la première question.
Merci, thank you. Please press star 1 at this time to ask a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. The first question is from Nicole Thompson of the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks, ministers. I'm wondering what will happen to the federal employees who choose not to get vaccinated.
So it's Dominic LeBlanc. I'll be happy to offer some comments, and if my colleagues want to add something, I would obviously hope they do. This is a mandatory requirement for the federal public service. Obviously, there will be certain individuals for medical reasons that will not be able to be vaccinated, and the appropriate officials will obviously work with them to ensure that that the appropriate measures are in place for those, as I say, who medically cannot be vaccinated, cannot accept a vaccination. But we expect the federal public service to want to comply with this mandatory requirement. We obviously, many people across the government of Canada have worked long days and many weekends precisely to help bring vaccines to Canada, to distribute them to provinces and territories, to work with provincial and territorial authorities to distribute these vaccines. So the government of Canada has been focused on vaccination and obviously believes, as do so many people that work with us, that this is the best way to end the pandemic and to allow for the economy to safely remain open. So we expect compliance from the federal public servants, and we'll obviously work with the appropriate bargaining agents to ensure that there can be the best way possible to ascertain these vaccination requirements, but we'll do so expeditiously. We're not we're going to move very quickly to get this done. Maybe Jennifer or Omar want to add something?
Let me start and then see if Jennifer wants to add something. In my former role as Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister for Public Service Renewal, I had the privilege of engaging and working with so many public servants across the entire government. And now in my role as Minister of Transport, I've really seen firsthand the commitment and the dedication that public servants have had for serving Canadians. And my sense is that public servants are supporting and applauding this commitment, and they all want to ensure that they have a safe workplace. Of course, there will be some requirements for accommodation based on legitimate reasons, and those will be worked out. But my sense is that public servants are very much applauding and supporting this initiative.
I will add, this is Jennifer O'Connell, I'll add that millions of Canadians have already stepped up to receive their vaccines, and that includes many public servants. So we thank them for doing so. We know vaccines are safe and effective, but as my colleagues have already pointed out, this is about ensuring as an employer that we also are creating safe workplaces for our employees and making sure that employees feel comfortable and safe going to work. And as it's already been said, of course, there will be accommodations for people who cannot receive the vaccine for medical reasons, but this is yet another step for those individuals who can't receive that vaccine to ensure that they themselves are in a safe workplace to help that they're not more vulnerable and are able to, again, have a safe workplace. So millions of Canadians have stepped up, and we just want to ensure that we go one step further to ensure that we are leading or taking the leadership role in this country to ensure that all employees feel safe going to work.
And did you have a follow-up?
Yes, but what about those who are able to get vaccinated but decide for, philosophical or religious reasons? I mean, maybe not religious, but for who don't believe in vaccination. What will happen to those who choose not to get vaccinated?
But again, those will be cases that will be dealt with individually by the appropriate public service managers. But what we're saying to the federal public service is this is now a mandatory requirement to go to work in a federal workplace or to work for the Government of Canada. And Omar, I think, outlined other federally regulated jurisdictions in which we will be also mandating this requirement. We expect the Crown corporations and federal agencies will also come to the Treasury Board with their plan to ensure that their workplaces are also safe. So we're not focused on those questions. We're focused on how to properly ensure that proof of vaccination is tendered by the public servants who have been vaccinated to work with unions, bargaining agents, and others. But public service managers will also be in a position to deal with employees that decide not to respect the mandatory requirement.
Thank you, Minister LeBlanc. And I will now hand it over to the moderator for the next question. Donc, excusez-moi, pas modérateur, opérateur, à vous pour la prochaine question.
Merci. The next question, la prochaine question est de Claudie Côté de TVA. À vous la parole.
Bonjour. Peut-être une spécification. J'aimerais savoir quand la vaccination va devenir obligatoire. Vous n'avez pas donné d'horizon de temps pour le moment. Et est-ce que vous connaissez le taux de vaccination en ce moment chez les fonctionnaires fédéraux?
Peut-être pour les industries ou les secteurs, par exemple, de transport que mon collègue, le ministre Alghabra, a décrit tantôt, il a clairement dit qu'au plus tard, à la fin octobre, nous allons prendre des mesures réglementaires nécessaires pour s'assurer que ces employés sont proprement vaccinés. On ne va pas attendre, évidemment, pour ces dates avant d'agir et avant d'obliger ces compagnies d'agir dans ces secteurs identifiés par le ministre des Transports. Nous n'avons pas pour le moment des renseignements sur le pourcentage de la fonction publique pleinement vaccinée, quoique on s'attend que c'est très élevé parce que, comme j'ai dit, ce sont bel et bien des femmes et des hommes qui ont travaillé de longues heures dans beaucoup de cas, précisément pour amener des vaccins aux Canadiens. Et d'autres fonctionnaires du gouvernement du Canada sont au travail depuis le début de la pandémie. Si vous êtes un officier correctionnel ou si vous travaillez dans le domaine de la santé publique, c'est sûr que vous êtes au travail depuis le début de la pandémie et ces gens-là comprennent comme nous que la meilleure façon de se protéger, mais de protéger sa famille, de protéger ses voisins, la collectivité, c'est de se faire vacciner. Mais c'est précisément le travail que le Conseil du Trésor va faire avec les syndicats de la fonction publique, avec tous les employés de la fonction publique au cours des prochaines semaines, demander la preuve vaccinale appropriée et trouver la meilleure façon d'obliger ceux et celles qui ne sont pas vaccinés et qui peuvent être vaccinés de se faire vacciner. C'est le travail qui va commencer dès la semaine prochaine.
Justement, qu'est-ce que vous allez faire avec ceux qui refusent de se faire vacciner? On ne peut pas discriminer là, sur le plan du travail en fonction du fait qu'on se fasse vacciner ou pas. C'est illégal. Alors, est-ce qu'il va y avoir des mesures d'accommodement pour ces personnes-là? Est-ce qu'on va leur demander de passer des tests, par exemple, sur une base hebdomadaire? Puis, simplement, vous n'avez pas répondu, là, outre le transport pour les autres fonctionnaires fédéraux, la mesure va entrer en place quand?
Pour la fonction publique fédérale, on s'attend que les mesures soient en place au plus tard sur l'échéancier du mois d'octobre que le ministre Alghabra a décrit pour le secteur, par exemple, des transports. Mais c'est précisément le genre de questions que nous allons entamer dès lundi. Le Conseil du Trésor va rencontrer les représentants syndicaux des organisations de la fonction publique fédérale au cours de la semaine prochaine et nous aurons au cours des prochaines semaines des précisions quant à la date où la vaccination mandatée va rentrer en vigueur. Mais comme nous avons dit, il y aura des circonstances pour des gens, par exemple, pour des raisons médicales qui ne peuvent pas être vaccinés. On va trouver la meilleure façon de les accommoder. Comme Mme O'Connell a bien dit, la meilleure façon aussi de leur protéger, c'est de s'assurer que les gens avec lesquels ils travaillent sont pleinement vaccinés. Et que nous avons entièrement confiance que les fonctionnaires du gouvernement du Canada et ceux et celles qui travaillent pour les sociétés de la couronne aussi vont respecter cette exigence. Mais les responsables de la fonction publique dans tous les ministères auront les outils nécessaires pour s'assurer que les gens sont pleinement vaccinés.
Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Donc, opérateur, à vous pour la prochaine question. Operator, to for the next question.
Merci, thank you. The next question is from John Paul Tasker of CBC News. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, ministers. Thanks for doing this. For Minister LeBlanc, the Prime Minister was asked about mandatory vaccinations in January. He said that this sort of regime would be, quote, an extreme measure and would have real divisive impacts on community and country. The Health Minister, Patty Hajdu, made similar comments as well, saying that no vaccines would be mandatory. So I guess the question is, what's changed, and why are we seeing this sort of climb down today from past comments?
So I'll offer some comments, and Omar and Jennifer may want to add something, Jean-Paul, but I obviously wouldn't describe it as a climb down. This is an evolution of the government's posture in protecting the health and safety of Canadians since the beginning of the pandemic. We have scientific data, but also real-world evidence on how remarkably effective are the vaccines that have been approved for use by Health Canada. So after months and months of deploying these vaccines literally into millions and millions of Canadian arms, we see how effective they are. We also see what other workplaces and other public service agencies around the world have done. And the Prime Minister asked the Clerk of the Privy Council to prepare options for the government on what a mandatory federal public service vaccination plan would look like. And that is exactly what we are announcing today. So it is very much a continuation of our government's efforts to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to protect the health and safety of Canadians. We think the Government of Canada has to lead by example. It's the country's biggest employer. We're also asking federally regulated industries, and they are also some of the largest private sector employers in the country, to take similar measures, and we'll be working collaboratively with them over the coming weeks as well. We see this as, frankly, a very important step, particularly with the Delta variant, for example, being more transmissible. Fully vaccinated Canadians are much, much more effectively protected than those that aren't. So this is a continuation of that effort that began, obviously, in March of last year. Omar or Jennifer may want to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. I'll just add to what you said, is that, from the beginning, our government has been focused on working with the provinces, on supporting our frontline health workers, on providing vaccine supplies, on providing PPEs. And we're seeing that organically, significant vaccination rates have been produced. Over 81% of Canadians, adult Canadians, have received one dose, and 70% have been fully vaccinated. So we can see that we are, hopefully in the final few miles of this marathon, and we need to do additional measures to incentivize and to close this gap, to continue on this momentum, so we can protect the health and safety of all Canadians, and actually protect as well the hard-won gains to our economy, to our sectors. We cannot afford to risk losing all of those gains.
Perhaps I will just add, I think our government, and certainly the Minister of Health, as I've worked closely with her, the commitment has always been the safety and the protection of Canadians. So wherever COVID has taken us, we have been committed to find the solutions to keep Canadians safe. And we know that vaccines are safe and effective. We also know, with variants of concerns, that vaccinations are still working and provide that level of protection that we need. And that, I think most importantly, vaccines not only keep yourself safe, but they keep your friends and neighbors safe. And that if we want to continue to return to life as normal, if we want to continue to support small businesses, to ensure that they can stay open and thrive and continue to travel and do all the things that I know Canadians are excited to continue to do, the best way to fight COVID-19 and to ensure that we have those opportunities, that we can see our loved ones, that we can hug each other again, is to continue to get vaccinated. So as my colleagues have said, we know that millions of Canadians have stepped up. We are taking a leadership role to not only create safe workplaces for our own employees, but it's also to set the example for Canadians to continue to step up, protect themselves, but protect our country and our communities.
As you might have seen, this message was kind of telegraphed last week when the Prime Minister mentioned it. There has been some opposition and criticism of it. David Yerdiga, who's a Conservative MP from Alberta, said forcing federal workers to get a vaccine is a tyrannical idea. He said Canadians deserve the right to choose whether to be vaccinated or not. And mandating vaccines like this is a slippery slope. He's fearful that it could be discriminatory, creating two classes of Canadians, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. What's your response to some of those concerns raised by this opposition MP?
I certainly don't think it'll surprise you that we don't agree with much of what Mr. Yerdiga says. So we'll give that all the weight it deserves. But we have taken a prudent approach, but we've also taken, we think, an effective approach to protect the health and safety of Canadians. We recognize that vaccines are by far the most effective weapon in the fight against COVID-19. And we think the federal public service and Crown agencies and Crown corporations want to do the right thing to protect their employees, but the communities in which they operate. So we expect a constructive but collaborative conversation with bargaining agents, with unions. And frankly, that's been the history of our work with the public service since the beginning of the pandemic. So we are very grateful and recognize the enormous work done by the public servants, including by their unions and their bargaining agents, in finding the best way that we could all serve Canadians in the best way possible during an unprecedented time. So this next step of mandatory vaccinations, we think, is an evolution of that posture to do what's necessary to protect Canadians. But Jennifer or Omar may want to add something.
Yeah, I just want to add, Dominic, you know what Canadians don't want? Canadians don't want to go back to lockdowns. Canadians don't want to go back to travel restrictions. Canadians want to go on with their lives and go back to normal as quickly as possible. And you know, it's not uncommon for a government to play a regulatory role when it comes to protecting the overall health and safety of Canadians. There are ample evidence of different measures that different levels of government regulate to ensure this protection of the safety of Canadians. And this is another example of how the government has a role, and it also demonstrates how much of a difference it makes, the policies that government make to improving the lives of Canadians. So we fundamentally disagree. Canadians expect this from their government, and we think it is the responsible and the prudent thing to protect the health and safety of all Canadians.
Thank you, ministers. Operator, over to you for the next question. Opérateur, à vous pour la prochaine question.
Merci. La prochaine question est de Catherine Lévesque de la Presse canadienne. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour à vous tous. Tout d'abord, avant de poser mes questions, je voulais juste rectifier parce que CIPAC, je pense, n'a pas de son actuellement. Donc, j'ai manqué les premières minutes de votre annonce, M. Leblanc. Donc, juste pour résumer, vaccination obligatoire pour les fonctionnaires fédéraux, mais pour ceux sous en fait, les industries sous réglementation fédérale, dans le fond, c'est fortement encouragé, c'est ça?
Le ministre des Transports, et merci, je suis content de vous donner les précisions parce que c'est important. Comme vous avez bien dit, mandatoire dans la fonction publique fédérale. On va travailler avec les sociétés d'État du gouvernement fédéral, les sociétés de la couronne aussi. Là, on pense par exemple Post-Canada, Radio-Canada, il y a d'autres sociétés d'État. On va travailler aussi pour s'assurer qu'eux autres ont les moyens de faire qu'est-ce qui est nécessaire en termes de vaccination de leurs employés. Mais le ministre des Transports a précisé les secteurs des transports et je demanderai peut-être à Omar de vous donner la réponse précise. On va mandater par règlement dans certains secteurs des transports la vaccination mandatoire. But Omar may be able to just give you the precise details in terms of those federally regulated sectors. We're not talking about Crown corporations. We're talking about private businesses, but regulated by the Government of Canada in certain sectors. Omar, do you want to clarify that?
Yes, Dominic, we are requiring federally regulated employers to adjust their rules to ensure that a mandate is imposed by no later than the end of October. So we will be working with employers on defining the new regulatory framework to ensure that all employees and a number of travelers will be fully vaccinated by no later than the end of October.
OK, parfait. Merci beaucoup pour les précisions. Et puis, les deux questions. La première est à vous, M. Leblanc. Donc, M. Trudeau a dit la semaine dernière seulement que ce serait, dans le fond, qu'il allait mandater la greffière du Conseil privé de se pencher sur cet enjeu. Là, maintenant, vous avez cette annonce. Je me demandais quand est-ce qu'elle a rendu sa décision, puis est-ce qu'elle a émis un rapport? Est-ce qu'il y a une trace des consultations qu'elle a menées?
Ben, moi, j'ai travaillé avec la greffière, avec Mme Charette, sur plusieurs autres dossiers. Je sais que c'est une personne rigoureuse qui travaille énormément fort, évidemment. Et je sais qu'elle a eu des discussions à travers la famille fédérale depuis que le premier ministre lui a confié ce mandat-là. Et je sais que les avis ou les options du Conseil privé ont été présentés au gouvernement il y a quelques jours, et c'est ça l'annonce que nous faisons aujourd'hui. Le premier ministre a pris la décision il y a 2 jours, et c'est ça l'annonce que nous faisons aujourd'hui.
Et juste une petite question pour vous, M. Alghabra. Pourquoi attendre à la fin du mois d'octobre pour implanter ces mesures-là alors qu'on est dans une 4e vague?
Thank you for your question. This matter, obviously, today we're signaling to the industry, to federal employees, that we want to do it as soon as possible. So the deadline of end of October is a deadline to get us there, but we are starting working on it as of Monday. This is going to require a lot of discussions with stakeholders, with employers, with unions, and we know that they all support this measure. We've spoken, I personally heard from airports, from airlines, from unions, that they support this measure. We now need to get to work, define the proper regulatory framework and the proper regimes for this. But end of October is the latest date that we want to get there. We are hoping and aiming to do it even sooner.
Thank you, ministers. Operator, over to you for the last question. Donc, opérateur, à vous pour la dernière question.
Merci, thank you. La dernière question, the last question, is from Sophia Harris of CBC News. Please go ahead.
Some private businesses which want to implement a vaccination requirement for workers say they're waiting for federal legislation or guidance before doing so. Is that coming at all?
I'll offer a few comments, and maybe Omar or Jennifer can add something. The Government of Canada obviously has jurisdiction in terms of private employers. We're not talking about the federal public service, but in terms of private sector employers, our jurisdiction is in certain sectors of the economy, well known, transport, obviously, banking, telecommunications. Those are the obvious examples of where the Government of Canada has a jurisdiction in terms of those workplaces. So we will also be working with those businesses and their employees to see how they too can ensure that their workplaces are safe and that they're protecting Canadians as well. But a great number of employment relationships are governed by provincial law and provincial labor codes and employment standards legislation in individual provinces obviously vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And those questions we would invite provincial leaders to take up with employers as well. But that's not properly part of our federal ability to legislate or to enact regulatory measures. We can enact regulations under existing legislation, and that's exactly, I think, what Omar is doing, for example, in the transportation sector, but he may want to add something, or Jennifer as well.
Yeah, Dominic, thank you. And just to elaborate or add to what Minister LeBlanc has said, in addition to the importance of what we're announcing today, we're also setting a leadership example to other industries, to other sectors. So yes, we have certain jurisdictions over certain industries, and this is what we're working on starting today. we hope that other sectors will follow our example and set a similar standard for their employees and their workplaces. Ultimately, again, we want to protect against losing all the gains that we've made. We want to protect against going back to lockdowns. We want to protect against losing jobs that we've seen during travel restrictions and other type of restrictions. We want to build on the significant gains that we've made so far. We're almost there. 82% of Canadians have received their first dose. We need to finish this race, and I know we will get there as soon as possible. Thank you.
I'll just add very quickly to what Minister LeBlanc and Minister Alghabra just said, but I think from health perspective, throughout this pandemic, even when it might be provincial or territorial jurisdiction, we have been frankly, we've even working directly with local public health units. So if there are opportunities to provide advice and guidance, the Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, we are there to support them in whatever they need. We have seen recent announcements, even, for example, universities coming out with vaccine protocols. And so although we may not have regulatory jurisdiction over all of these industries, certainly Health Canada and the minister's priority has been to it has been committed to working with them to provide the best public health advice that we can, and in any ways that we can support provinces and territories in taking the regulatory measures that they need to take in their jurisdictions.
Thank you very much, Parliamentary Secretary and Ministers. Donc voilà qui met fin à cette conférence de presse. That will conclude today's press conference. Merci d'avoir été parmi nous. Thank you for joining us today.
Merci beaucoup.